Yo, what is up, everybody? It's again. Welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today we got a video that I am very excited for, very intrigued by, and quite surprised that I haven't done it yet. This is Could Itachi beat the 5 Kage by the great Swagkage. Now, I can't believe I haven't done this because Itachi's my favorite character. And I love listening or watching anything that involves Itachi. You know, he's the god of deception, the god of genjutsu, and has an aura about him that is very unique, and not just in Naruto, but in any anime ever. In my opinion, you know, he's badass, he's mysterious, he's a beast, straight up. And obviously, in this scenario, hypothetical scenario, he's going to be facing the 5 Kage. Now, I'm assuming it's the 5 Kage from the 4th grade ninja war, the one that fought Madara and got clapped by. So, you know, Mei, A, Onaku, Tsunade, and Gaara, right? So I'm assuming them against Itachi. Coming into this, even though I love Itachi, I'm assuming Swag is going to say he doesn't beat them. I agree with that. Would he put up a fight? Yeah, I think he would, but he'd probably lose to all 5 of them at once. Now, if it was one-on-one, I think he might even beat each one-on-one, debatably. I'm not saying for sure, all right, because I know Onuki is quite the shinobi, and so is A. But this is very interesting, to say the least. So it's going to be interesting to see what Swag has to say. But before I begin, you know, anything that's really appreciated, hit the like button, drop on bell notifications to stay with yours truly. And if you are new and you enjoy, and you miss with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button, man, because once you do, become part of the family forever. Let's not waste more time. Screen. Let's see what Swag has to say today.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is not at all what I expected my next video to be about. As a matter of fact, I was planning on talking about Shisui. But then, a little while ago, somebody tagged me in a Twitter conversation, and to keep a long story short,
Itachi would have been washed.
If I thought Itachi could beat the 5 Kage, like, all at once by himself. And my first instinct was to say, absolutely not. The 5 Kage would rip him to pieces. But then it sat with me for a few days, and I thought about it some more, and I was like, well, maybe I'm not giving Itachi as much credit as he deserves. Now, I want to make sure it's clear that when I said the 5 Kage would beat him, I was taking Itachi's sickness and near
right.
And in this video, I'm still going to do that.
So weakened Itachi.
Looking at a hypothetical prime Itachi that isn't sick and isn't on the verge of blindness, but is just as powerful as he was when he fought Sasuke. Now, the cool thing about this fight is that we can use Sasuke's fight with the 5 Kage as a point of reference. And now Sasuke didn't fight all 5 of them at the same time, and he fought Danzo in place of Tsunade.
Yeah, he did pretty well in my opinion.
All things considered, he did pretty well, and we can sort of use this to form an idea of how well Itachi might do if he were to fight against them as well. Now, before I talk about anything else, I want to say that I think the most important thing to take away from Sasuke's fight with the Kage is that they were strong enough to force him to use his Mangekyo Sharingan so much that he ended up going blind. Now, even if you don't think Itachi needs his Susanoo to beat the 5 Kage, I think it's a pretty big stretch to say that he could beat them without his Sharingan altogether. And
I agree.
There are a lot of things,
especially against A, right?
I was on the verge
Guy is a lightning timer, basically.
First of all, of course, there's the fact that Sasuke went blind pretty much immediately after he got his Mangekyo Sharingan. And I know this is because he used it like an absurd amount throughout the time period that he had it, but he only used it in like 2 fights. His fight against B and his fight against the 5 Kage, the same people that Itachi would be fighting in this hypothetical. Also, Sasuke had just gotten his Mangekyo Sharingan.
Exactly, yep.
This Itachi has had his for a while. And in his fight with Sasuke, we literally see from his perspective that his vision is really blurry at this point in his life. It's clear that Itachi has used his Mangekyo Sharingan a fair bit, and in a fight against the 5 Kage, all at the same time, I don't think that they would last him for that much longer. Something I'd like to point out is that
that's definitely fair.
Blind, it was pretty shortly after his Susanoo had fully evolved. And of course, as we see in Itachi's fight with Sasuke, Itachi's Susanoo is fully evolved by the time this fight happens. So let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, since I'm going to talk about an Itachi that doesn't have this problem later in the video, that we can all agree that Itachi's Mangekyo isn't gonna last him for very long in this fight. So
probably even shorter than Sasuke did, right? He's already sick, already going blind.
It's really hard for me to say that Itachi has any chance against the 5 Kage under these circumstances. They were almost able to seal Madara, and okay, I know it's like sort of a joke at this point that I bring up Madara in like every versus battle, even the ones he doesn't participate in. But can we all agree that he's at least a little bit relevant in this fight, since we're talking about the 5 Kage, and like the only time we ever see all of them fight as a group is against Madara? Anyway, so the 5 Kage were almost able to seal Madara, right? The only reason they couldn't is because he whipped out his perfect Susanoo, and there was really nothing they could do about that. that. But even with all of his, like, Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan Rinnegan, Hashirama Cell, Wood Style, Wood Clone,
I'm gonna say this. The only reason they got close is because he allowed them to get close. Alright, Madara was toying with them. Madara's not in this discussion. He's in a whole different league compared to all these people, right? We can all agree with that. He was toying with them. He was fucking with them. He could have ended this pretty quickly, probably, if he wanted to. He could have pulled out the perfect Susanoo from the jump and slaughtered all these guys. That's just my opinion, but I guess it's relevant enough. Madara is a monster, whether he's playing around or not. So
nonsense. Even with multiple full-body Susanos, all of this other crazy stuff that they had to deal with, the 5 Kage were able to nearly beat Madara. You could maybe argue that he was holding back, but I don't think
he was holding back, in my opinion.
Holding back is going to make up for the difference between Madara's arsenal of wood release, all the Rinnegan.
Oh, that point he's making, I agree with. Yeah.
Wood clones, all this crazy stuff versus Itachi's like Genji.
That I agree with. Yes.
Jutsu once his Sharingan has run out.
Yeah.
So again, seeing as the 5 Kage beat a significantly more powerful enemy, at least without taking his perfect Susanoo into account, I don't think there's any way to argue that Itachi stands a chance here. Now moving forward, I'm gonna do Itachi a favor and assume he doesn't have to worry about any of these things. No near blindness, no sickness, none of that. He's completely healthy. And if you pit Itachi up against the 5 Kage like this, that does actually affect things substantially. Now since I didn't really do this before, let's go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of Itachi's capabilities. They matter a whole lot more in this round than they did in the last one, since this one isn't a one-sided stomp. And I want to start by talking about Itachi's speed. A lot of people have spread the idea that Itachi is significantly faster than the Raikage, and I was guilty of doing this in the past as well. This is because he was able to briefly keep pace with QB Chakra Mode Naruto when the two of them fought during the war. And of course, Naruto displayed pretty definitively that he was faster than A was. Now I think this exchange between Naruto and Itachi has been blown way out of proportion. First of all, the two of them are only seen trading blows for about one page, and there is nothing on this page to suggest that Naruto is trying his hardest. As a matter of fact, the opposite is actually implied. The two of them spend the entire page talking, and it's not just regular fight banter. Naruto is asking Itachi questions that he considers the answers to very important. Stuff about the Uchiha clan massacre, and by extension, stuff about Sasuke. This would have been Naruto's only opportunity to ask Itachi if Obito was telling the truth about why the Uchiha clan was wiped out. So I think it's totally fair to assume that Naruto's mind was a bit preoccupied on this page, and that affected his performance. Now this would be one thing if Naruto had just run circles around the Raikage, but that's not what happened at all. It's not like he outsped him so extremely that even being able to touch Naruto is a sign that somebody is as fast or faster than A was. Naruto got hit a lot in this fight, and he even says verbatim that A can keep up with Biju mode. It took Naruto's complete focus just for him to avoid one of the Raikage's attacks, and him dodging this one single attack is treated as like a super triumphant moment. Plus, he's still at a negative record for attacks dodged versus attacks he was hit by. And I'm not saying that the Raikage is like faster than Naruto or anything because of all of this, because that's obviously not what Kishimoto was trying to convey when he had Naruto dodge that attack at the end there. What I am saying is that there's a lot more information present that implies the two of them are similar in speed.
Definitely relative, yeah.
That implies that Naruto is way faster than the Raikage.
I agree.
Now all that said, if you were able to prove that Itachi and Naruto were about the same speed, then you could reliably claim that he's faster than the Raikage by at least a little bit. And I've seen some people attempt to do this by claiming that since Itachi and Sasuke should have been about the same speed, and Sasuke and Naruto should have been about the same speed, then that would therefore mean Itachi is about as fast as Naruto is. The thing is, for this to be the case, we have to agree on something that just isn't true, and that's that Sasuke is as fast as KCM Naruto. For a while I wasn't sure why people thought this, but after enough digging through forums, I think I found the answer, and the most common reason is that Sasuke claimed he was going to match his chakra level to Naruto's when they made the Inferno-style Rasen Shuriken that they teleported into Obito. I guess from this, people extrapolated that Sasuke matched his power, his speed, all of his physical attributes.
Now, before we go any further, when it comes to Itachi, the Raikage, and Naruto, this is my take on it, right? This is my opinion. I'm not saying it's absolute, but against the fourth Raikage, Naruto was in a desperate kind of, in a desperate kind of state, trying to get to the war and help, the great Shinobi Alliance. He definitely went all out to some extent against A, just to dodge out one shot. Showed that he was faster. I think that's what Kishimoto wanted to say, that he is now faster than the fourth Raikage. Now, he's not fucking way faster, obviously, just fast enough at that point in time to outspeed the fourth Raikage, right? Similar to like how Minato did. Maybe not to that extent, but you know what I'm saying here. Now, when he was swapping hands with Itachi, I think he was more in a defensive mode, not trying to kill Itachi or anything. He was speaking to Itachi, knowing that Itachi was under the reanimation jutsu effect, under that trance by Kabuto. So he was swapping hands, going fast enough to dodge or block Itachi's strikes. Now, this is what I'm saying about Itachi. He's relative to both. I think he's slower than both, in my opinion, than the Kage and Naruto. Not by much. I think he's in a ballpark, right? He's relative. But that's my stance on it. Maybe some of you disagree. Maybe you guys think he's faster than Naruto. Feel free to let me know in the comments, but that's my opinion on it. They're all relative in speed. That's my conclusion. But Naruto's the fastest, then probably the fourth Kage, and then Itachi. And it's not very, significant, in my opinion, the gap in speed. That's just my opinion. Feel free to let me know if you disagree.
To Naruto, and that's just wrong. First of all, this was just a temporary thing, and it required Sasuke to use his Sharingan to do it. And second of all, I thought it was pretty clear that he meant he was doing this strictly for the purpose of combining his jutsu with Naruto's. They just needed to make sure that the jutsu wasn't made up of too much of one half. It needed to be 50% Wind style and 50% Inferno style. A few chapters before this, when they do the whole Inferno style Rasen Shuriken thing for the first time, Tobirama explains that this is pretty much exactly what they meant, and that it's something that any two-man squad can do, but often struggles to do. There would be no reason to compliment them for just being at the same level of strength. So I think it's absolutely 100% true that they were just trying to make sure one half of the combination didn't outweigh the other half, not that they were trying to match their power levels. Now, if you're still not convinced, this hypothesis kind of debunks itself over the course of the next few chapters. If Naruto and Sasuke had equal chakra levels or whatever, Sasuke wouldn't be saying things like, Naruto's got this much chakra, or this is Naruto now with perfect control over this much chakra. And if you don't want to take Sasuke's word for it, Hashirama himself compared Naruto's chakra reserves to his own, and there's just no world in which Sasuke's chakra is even somewhat close to being worth talking about in the same sentence as Hashirama's. He just doesn't have that much.
Agreed. Definitely agree.
Chakra levels to speed and power. If you want a direct speed comparison, though, Sasuke wasn't able to hit Madara at all after he came back to life and stole Hashirama's Sage Mode. But the first time Naruto attempts to attack him, he manages to blitz him. There's also another, admittedly much easier method of addressing this, and that is by showing that B, who is slower, albeit not by much, than the Raikage, didn't have any trouble avoiding every attack Itachi threw at him. Like, Itachi trapped B in a Genjutsu and almost immediately lobbed a whole bunch of shuriken at him, and B not only broke out of the Genjutsu, but still had enough time to take out all 8 of his swords and deflect all of the shuriken before they could hit him. Now, granted, the speed at which Itachi throws his shuriken isn't the same thing as the speed at which he can move his arms and legs, of course, but B also manages to grab Itachi with one of his tentacles and easily avoids an attack from behind. So you can take from this what you want. It doesn't necessarily imply that B is as fast as or faster than Itachi, but I think it's pretty good evidence to support the idea that Itachi hasn't completely eclipsed the Raikage in terms of speed. And I keep seeing this thing. It's like this blog post on a power scaling wiki or something that tries to explain through the use of pixel measurements on the pages of the manga and calculus or whatever why Naruto is 73 times faster than the Raikage. And even if this wasn't just a hyper-literal misinterpretation of a scene composition choice made by the author of the manga, which is exactly what it is, but even if it wasn't that, that wouldn't change the fact that this is a massive outlier and completely contradicts everything else that happened up to this point in the fight. Personally, I feel like Itachi is, at best, just below the Raikage in terms
That's my opinion as well.
And I'm more comfortable saying that he's probably substantially...
By the way, that thing you showed, the calculus thing, it doesn't apply. You can't use pixels on a screen to determine the speed of an individual. That is very disingenuous to do.
You know, is absolutely faster than him, even if it's only by a little bit. Now, I think this difference is going to be made
I agree with Swag.
more noticeable thanks to teamwork between the Raikage and the Tsuchikage. We're shown during the Kage's fight with Madara that Onoki can drastically increase a person's speed by making them lighter, and increase their strength by a similar amount by making them heavier, which brings me to my next point, that being Itachi's durability. So depending on which of the Kage we're talking about, this may or may not be relevant at all. Gaara is pretty much able to completely bypass Itachi's physical durability durability because he can just seal him underneath a lot of sand. And as long as we're not factoring in the Yata mirror, Onoki can just dismantle Itachi's body at like a molecular level. Mei can also use acid that's been shown to be capable of melting through a person's Susanoo, so chances are it would probably do a lot of damage to Itachi's skin. So that means the only two characters who I'm going to be comparing the attack power of to Itachi's durability are Tsunade and the Raikage, who are unfortunately for Itachi two of the hardest hitting characters in the whole series. And I feel like especially if they get amped by Onoki, a couple good hits from them would probably be enough to kill him. Fortunately for Itachi, he has an indestructible shield, and the 5 Kage can't really do anything about the Yata mirror. On the other hand, the Yata mirror is unidirectional, like it doesn't wrap all the way around his Susanoo. So if the Kage are able to mount an assault from the sides or from behind, they can at least attempt to break through his Susanoo, but that's easier said than done because the Susanoo is pretty big, so I'd imagine that circling around it wouldn't be easy. And they also have the Totsuka blade, which can one-shot any of them to worry about. Depending on where they fight though, Gaara might be able to ignore the Yata mirror. As we saw when Madara was first reanimated, Gaara was able to use the sand at his feet to straight up rip him out of his Susanoo, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to do the same thing to Itachi. Right. Now, even if they fight somewhere without a bunch of sand, like a forest or something, Gaara should still be able to use sand tsunami or whatever to introduce a bunch of sand to the environment. If they fight somewhere indoors, like the 5 Kage summit venue or something though, then this won't be an option. And under these circumstances, without a method of bypassing the Yata mirror, things will be significantly more difficult for the 5 Kage. But if Gaara is able to yoink Itachi out from his Susanoo, then I think the Raikage and Tsunade are going to be able to do a lot.
They'll probably beat him to death.
During his fight with Sasuke, he was noticeably injured by 2 shurikens stabbing him in the leg. And I know some people are going to be like, but Swag, Itachi was just holding back. But it doesn't make sense that he'd be able to, like, decrease the durability of his skin. Now, even if you do think Itachi made his skin softer so that the shuriken could penetrate him, that doesn't explain why he was worried when he realized that the shuriken were rigged. And I know some people are going to say, but it was just an act. He needed to convince Sasuke that he was trying his hardest. And I mean, that would be a good argument if he had actually said that he was surprised out loud and not thought it in his head where Sasuke couldn't hear him. And even then, when he's reanimated, during his fight with Bee and Naruto, he still uses shuriken. Granted, they're flaming shuriken, but it's still obviously something that Itachi considers at least a minor threat to a person's safety, so I imagine that a full power punch or kick from the Raikage or Tsunade, especially if they're amped up by Onoki, I mean, Itachi's just not walking away from an attack.
I agree. He won't.
He won't. It's not gonna happen. I don't think he'd die in like one hit or whatever, but a handful of these attacks should be more than enough to get the job done, at least assuming Itachi isn't being protected by his Susanoo. I know some people are bound to disagree with me, but Tsunade's strength is no joke, and neither is the Raikage's. For example, Bee was really scared when he saw a power up to max against Naruto, and even implied that he thought the Raikage's next attack was gonna one-shot him. Now, I'm not saying that A could kill Casey and Naruto with one punch. B was probably wrong, and saying otherwise would be a little ridiculous. But for B to even consider this a possibility, the punch would have to be strong enough to at least injure Naruto. I think a really good way to drive my point home is by bringing up Sasuke's fight with the 5 Kage again, specifically his fight.
Okay, so we're about halfway through this video, and I have to chime in here. Now, I think, that is my opinion, Swag is underestimating Itachi a little bit. Now, granted, I still think the 5 Kage would win in most scenarios. Most scenarios. I'm not saying that Itachi stomps. I'm not saying he claps. None of that. So hear me out here. He's kind of not really going, taking into account, I should say, Itachi's ability to deceive. Outright, power, it's not going to win against the 5 Kage. No shit. He doesn't have the power output to negate A and fucking Onoki and Tsunade and all that, right? He doesn't. But he has his ability to deceive. Deception. Genjutsu. Luckily, none of these guys are Jinchuriki, at least anymore. Gaara's not a Jinchuriki. Nor do they have a Sharingan. So, if they get caught in Genjutsu, it's not good. It's not good. So there's that. Also, to the 5 Kage's credit, the Yatamir wouldn't be a problem. I mean, put Tsunade on one side, put A on the other, amp A, and have them blitz from both sides. They're going to break the fucking Susanoo. And I think we can all safely say Itachi's Susanoo is inferior in both durability and power to Madara's, right? Madara has a fucking massive mountain-sized perfect Susanoo, while Itachi, I'm guessing, probably has a pretty good sized one, even in his prime, but not anything comparable to Madara's. So the Yatamir wouldn't be a problem. They could just attack him from 2 different sides. he'll have to escape. He can't get hit by both of them at the same time. One of them will be blocked by the Yarami, the other will fucking clap the Susanoo from the back and probably break it. If not, crack it heavily. And to add on top of that, May could use Boral release and start melting the shit too. So he'd be overwhelmed by the numbers, I believe. But I think he'd be very strategic here, right? And he'd be as subtle as possible. He wouldn't show his face right away. They'd fucking blitz him. And he probably wouldn't be fast enough to evade, especially the A. I think he'd be very subtle. He'd try to hold on at least. He would try to hold on and maybe try to take one out, take them out one by one. I think he'd be very strategic. And Swag didn't even go over Amaterasu. Amaterasu is a fucking problem. I mean, we saw what it did to A when Sasuke used it at the 5 Kage Summit. He had to fucking take off his arm. So that's a problem. I think for all those Kage, it'd be a problem. Unless Onuki can somehow pinpoint his particle style and like deatomize Amaterasu. I don't know if that's possible. I never really thought of that, actually. If he could actually use particle style to not extinguish the fire, but deatomize it. I don't know if that's possible. If you guys know that, let me know in the comments. But I didn't think of that until now. Maybe he could. But if he can't, it's a real problem. Because what if he starts using Amaterasu? Now, this is in his prime. Now, if he's sick, he just doesn't have the tools or the durability or the stamina to keep up. Eventually, they'd get him. Let's say even if he is subtle, if he is hiding, hiding around. It depends on the environment too, right? If they're fighting in the fucking desert, what the hell is he going to do? Hide underground? But if he's in like at the 5 Kage Summit and he's trying to genjutsu all these guys one by one or something like that, he has a better chance. The odds increase for sure, especially if he's in his prime. Now, if he's sick, I don't think, regardless of the environment, he'd lose 7 to 8 out of 10 times with mid to maybe moderate difficulty. I don't think they'd have a hard time because he's already sick and shit. And A is a monster, along with Onuki's amplification of power when he decreases gravity and basically gives more umph to this attack of A. And he'd probably do it for Tsunade too, who technically hits harder than A. I think she does. I might be wrong on that, but they're definitely relative in power as far as striking power. So if Itachi's sick, it's going to be a problem. If he's in his prime and he has decent amount of chakra, the Amaterasu could be a real problem. It's also his genjutsu. His genjutsu, his finger pointing genjutsu, his Tsukuyomi. It's going to be a real problem. And I think Swag hasn't gone over that. Now, in his prime, this is my conclusion so far. In his prime, in the right environment, with the right game plan, he could win maybe 3 out of 10 times. 3.5. That's maxed out. Not even 4, but 3.5 out of 10 times with extremely high difficulty. That's his best odds, in my opinion. 3.5. 3.5 is like high balling. You maybe run it off to 4, but it would be extremely fucking difficult to beat them all. With all their work, all their abilities, all the danger that they impose, the speed of A, the power of Tsunade, the particle style of Onoki, May's Boral release, everything. It's like, in a way, they're his kryptonite. But he has his own fucking tools that could be problematic. But that's my take on it. I still think they win most times and not the 5 Kage, I mean. But let's continue.
Fight with the Raikage. Now, I know Itachi in his prime should be quite a bit stronger than Sasuke was at this point, but I don't think there's any reason to assume that there's some massive gulf between them as far as durability is concerned. Susanoo aside, what the two of them can withstand should be pretty similar. And Sasuke couldn't just stand there and take what the Raikage was dishing out. He had to constantly, throughout the whole fight, protect himself with his Susanoo ribcage. Furthermore, Sasuke didn't seem too confident in the ribcage's ability to protect him, because right after he brings it out, like as in the first time the Raikage tries to attack him after the Liger Bomb, Sasuke coats the ribcage in Amaterasu using Kagetsuchi as an added layer of protection. And it's not like Sasuke was just being paranoid or something. This was definitely a good idea, because right after he does this, A tears through the ribcage without any trouble. Now, Tsunade's strength kind of speaks for itself. She hits even harder than the Raikage does, and some of her feats are pretty ridiculous. She punches this gigantic hole in Madara. I've seen some people who have
very impressive
and think that this was just a wood clone, but at least as far as I'm aware, aware. Madara substituted his real self out for a wood clone after Tsunade hit him. So this was the real Madara, and Tsunade left a massive hole in his chest with a single punch. So no matter how you want to interpret this, I think it's a pretty clear sign that one of Tsunade's attacks is going to do at least borderline lethal damage to Itachi.
Agreed.
Sure, some people are going to be like, well, Swag, you see, Madara was weaker because he was Edo Tensei, so durability probably
not that much weaker.
Not
that much weaker.
Like Edo Tensei, nerfed or not, he's still Madara. And
Definitely.
I really hope that there's nobody out there that thinks that even in his prime, Itachi is more of a physical tank than Madara. But still, if Tsunade, deleting Madara's torso with a single punch isn't impressive enough for you, she also cracked through his Susanoo's ribcage with one punch, and then shattered it completely with a follow-up kick. Now, to be fair, when Tsunade actually broke through the Susanoo, she did have help from Inoki and the Raikage. But you could argue that all they did was stop Madara from advancing further back so that Tsunade could catch up to him, because it's not like the entire ribcage broke apart, only the side that Tsunade attacked did. I should also add that Madara's ribcage completely shrugged off a Super Odama Rasengan. And finally, Tsunade also topples one of Madara's full-body Susanoo wood clones with a single punch, which is pretty similar to the way that the same level of Madara's Susanoo reacted to having a Hirudora shot at it by 7th Gate Guy. And Tsunade did all of this without ever having her strength increased by Inoki. Now, the thing is, Itachi doesn't really have any durability feats that don't involve his Susanoo. As a matter of fact, it's shown pretty consistently that it's possible to damage him with baseline attacks, like Kabuto's Chakra Scalpel, or even, again, Sasuke's Rigged Shuriken. I've seen some pretty crazy takes about the amount of damage Itachi can withstand on forums and stuff, but the one that's definitely the most absurd is the idea that Itachi's durability is like 10 Tails level or something, because he should be relative to Naruto, who tanked the Jubi Cataclysm attack. So first of all, Itachi just isn't as strong or as durable as Naruto is.
Definitely not.
In the series implies that. Also,
Agreed.
One panel after we see Naruto standing in the fallout of the explosion, we're shown that he was powered up by all of the Biju when he tanked it. Now, even setting all of that aside, there are two ways you can look at this. The first is that the Jubi Cataclysm wasn't even that devastating, because everyone who was there when it happened survived it thanks only to a little Biju chakra cloak Naruto created for all of them. Now, maybe you could argue that the only reason everybody survived despite their relatively lackluster protection is because they were much further from the center of the explosion than Naruto was. In that case, the second way you can look at this is, even if it was a super powerful attack and surviving it was a really big deal, Madara, who was closer to but not quite in the center of the explosion, summoned his Susanoo to protect himself. And his Susanoo wasn't already active when the explosion happened or whatever. It's not like he just happened to be in it and didn't feel like leaving. You clearly see him moments before this summon his Susanoo in order to defend himself.
Correct.
So even if Itachi was comparable to KCM Naruto in terms of power and durability, which again he isn't, he still wouldn't be able to withstand something like this without his Susanoo. I feel like I spent too long addressing that, but I really don't want to get comments about stuff like this. Now let's move on to the aspect of Itachi's durability that's actually relevant, that being the durability of his Susanoo, setting aside the Yata Mirror, of course. How tough it is to crack through Itachi's Susanoo depends on how we interpret a few things. Personally, I think he blocked Kirin with the Yata Mirror, but I know not everybody believes this, and there's nothing in the series that definitively proves it happened one way or the other. Some people think it doesn't even matter because Itachi was holding back, near death, and plagued by sickness, and all three of these things could have made Itachi Susanoo substantially weaker than it would have been if they weren't factors. All of these interpretations say drastically different things about the durability of this Susanoo, because even though it kept Kirin from killing him, he still sustained a few injuries from it, and his cloak was also vaporized. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to assume that its durability lies somewhere in between that of Sasuke's Susanoo during the 5-Kage Summit and Madara's Susanoo.
Definitely in between.
Probably right in the middle of both of them. So in that case, cracking through his Susanoo would be easy for the 5-Kage, but I don't think it would be impossible either. Now, if all 5 of them were able to attack it at the same time, that would be one thing. But at least one of them is going to have to give Itachi something to block with the Yata Mirror.
Correct.
This means that at best, 4 of them will be able to attack the Susanoo at the same time, and really the only 2 with the physical attack power necessary to break through it are Tsunade and the Raikage. And I feel like Itachi is going to go out of his way to use the Yata Mirror to protect his Susanoo from the attacks of these 2 specifically more than anyone else. Now, the good news for the Kage is they have 1, possibly even 2 get out of out-of-jail free cards versus Itachi Susanoo. The first is something I've already talked about, and that is Gaara's sand. If they're anywhere other than indoors, Gaara's going to be able to yoink Itachi out of the Susanoo.
Yeah, pull him out. Yep.
Now, if they're in a situation where this isn't possible, it is possible that Inoki might be able to just eat through the Susanoo with his particle style. Some of you might be thinking that I'm just giving Inoki a lot more credit than he deserves. And I get that, but this is actually based on something that happens in the manga. It's not as concrete as I'd like it to be, but it does have a pretty clear implication. So basically what happens is Tsunade rips off one of the Susanoo's limbs and tries to cut through Madara with it. Then Madara says, well, sorry, but you can't kill me with my own jutsu. Now it's important to recognize that he says this while clad in his Susanoo ribcage. Inoki then immediately butts in and says, my jutsu can kill you. Then he fires a particle-style beam at Madara, and everybody's like, oh man, you got him! You killed him, good job! And Madara doesn't even bother trying to block it with his Susanoo. He actually dispels his Susanoo and goes out of his way to absorb the Jinton jutsu with the Rinnegan. Also, right after this, Madara treats Inoki like an idiot, not for trying to use Jinton against somebody who can protect themselves with a Susanoo, but instead for forgetting that the Rinnegan can absorb ninjutsu. Also, later in the fight, Inoki just deletes all of Madara's Susanoo-clad wood clones with a single particle-style jutsu. And even though we don't see the real Madara inside of his Susanoo before this, he says right afterwards that his Susanoo kept him from absorbing the particle-style jutsu properly, which of course implies that the particle-style managed to get through his Susanoo, and that means it should be able to do the same thing to Itachi's. So unless I'm wrong, and Inoki's particle style doesn't work this way, and unless they're in a situation where Gaara can't pull Itachi out of the Susanoo with his sand, the Kage have multiple ways around it, and that's without even mentioning the possibility that Mei might be able to melt it with her vapor style.
Exactly.
So even if it's so durable that the 5 Kage aren't able to break it through physical means, they still have a handful of ways of pretty much completely bypassing it available to them. So since the 5 Kage's offensive prowess pretty clearly exceeds Itachi's defensive prowess, the only way for him to win this is if his own offense exceeds their defense by a greater amount. Now, since we're talking about Itachi, something like this is actually fairly possible, since he has access to a lot of crazy one-shot abilities that the Kage have to watch out for. I think the most dangerous things he has up his sleeve are the Totsuka Blade and his various genjutsu, especially because he can use both of them in combination with one another. Being able to immobilize someone with genjutsu and then instantly seal them with the Totsuka Blade is obviously pretty dangerous, but the thing is Itachi can only do this to one person at a time. Even though it's not explicitly stated that all of Itachi's genjutsu are single target, we have never ever seen him cast a genjutsu on more than one person simultaneously.
Right.
Now before anybody says it, yes, I know that before Itachi first used Tsukuyomi, Kakashi told Asuma and Kurenai to close their eyes. So first of all, Kakashi had no idea how Tsukuyomi worked at this point, so even if he did think that Itachi was going to catch all 3 of them with Tsukuyomi, that doesn't mean that Itachi could have actually done it. It could have just been him being cautious, and anyway, nothing about what he says actually implies he even thinks Itachi is going to use it on all 3 of them at once. Kakashi told them to close their eyes because he didn't want Itachi to try and use Tsukuyomi on either of them instead of him. He thought his own Sharingan would give him some amount of immunity to whatever Sharingan genjutsu he thought Itachi was about to cast. And if he had been right about this, and whatever jutsu Itachi was going to use didn't work on him, then of course Itachi would have tried to use it on either Asuma or Kurenai instead. And if
Kakashi would have killed them.
He told one of them to close their eyes for some reason, then Itachi would have just looked at whoever still had their eyes open. And anyway, the idea that Tsukuyomi or Uchiha genjutsu in general are multi-target is later debunked during Kakashi's very next fight with Itachi, when Shio literally says that Uchiha aren't super dangerous when they're fighting multiple enemies at once because they can't trap all of their opponents in the same genjutsu.
Right.
Anyway, even if Tsukuyomi was multi-target, I'm sure the Kage would have enough sense to just not look into Itachi's eyes. And before anybody says it, yes, I know the Raikage was caught by Madara's genjutsu, but to be fair, he was fighting 5 Susanoo wood clones at the same time, so he was under way more pressure than I imagine Itachi would be able to put on him. Now, of course, I know Itachi knows more genjutsu than just Tsukuyomi and his generic Sharingan genjutsu, so Chiyo's statement about Uchiha versus large groups of people, that doesn't necessarily mean Itachi doesn't know any genjutsu that work on more than one person at the same time. But like I said before, we've never seen him use a multi-target genjutsu, so we don't know if he can. It's kind of implied implied that Itachi can do this sort of thing in chapter 540, but the statement about it is pretty vague. So basically what happens is Shikaku and Inoichi are trying to figure out how the enemy has managed to infiltrate multiple allied shinobi forces camps spread throughout their territory. The reason this is so weird is because they have sensory ninja stationed at all of these camps, but still somehow the enemy is managing to sneak past them. They later find out that this is because white Zetsu are impersonating members of the allied shinobi forces, and they're even able to manipulate their chakra signatures, so that even sensory ninja mistake them for the people they're impersonating. Now the statement about Itachi comes from before they realize this. Shikaku hypothesizes that a genjutsu is being used by someone on the outside, and the first person that he can think of that might be capable of something like this is Itachi. However, Inoichi immediately says that something like this would be far beyond the capabilities of even Itachi, so this doesn't really tell us much anyway. Now to be fair, based on the way they're talking about him, it is kind of fair to assume that maybe he's used multi-target genjutsu in the past, but even if that is the case, we have no idea how one of these would work, even if Itachi could use it, because we've never seen him do it before.
Yeah, we just don't know enough.
I do get why people bring this up, and I don't want to downplay Itachi, but it's a bit outrageous to assume, based on this 3-sentence conversation between two people who probably don't even know him all that well, that he has a genjutsu at his disposal that can 1. Immobilize multiple targets at once, and 2. Leave them immobilized for long enough that he can stab all of them with the Totsuka blade without being interrupted. Even if they had been right, and Itachi had been the person behind this genjutsu, all it actually did was nullify the sensory powers of the allied shinobi force's sensory ninja. So not only did they barely know Itachi, they also turned out to be wrong, and even if they had been right, the statement wouldn't be anywhere close to impressive enough to convince me that Itachi could just walk onto the battlefield, look at all 5 Kage, trap them in a genjutsu, and instantly win the fight with the Totsuka blade.
Yeah, that's just a stretch, right? I agree. That's a huge stretch.
Genjutsu is formidable. I just don't think that he can use it on more than one person at the same time. He'll probably manage to trap one of the 5 Kage in a genjutsu they can't escape from, but since both Inoki and Gaara are capable of bypassing his Susanoo, one of them might be able to get rid of the Susanoo before Itachi can even seal the other with the Totsuka blade. And as long as the genjutsu that Itachi uses isn't Tsukuyomi, then I'm sure at least one of the other 5 Kage, particularly Tsunade, will be able to dispel it. Now, aside from his genjutsu, the only thing Itachi has that poses a serious threat to the 5 Kage is the Totsuka blade. But since Inoki and Gaara can constantly just yeet him out of his Susanoo, he won't be able to reliably seal them with it. To be fair, the 5 Kage shouldn't know how the Totsuka blade works, but at the same time, I don't think any of them, aside from probably Tsunade, I guess, would go charging headfirst straight into this gigantic chakra blade. Even if they don't know that it will seal them away as soon as it touches them, it still looks like getting hit by it would hurt really bad. Amaterasu might be a problem if it can actually hit any of the Kage, but the Raikage is fast enough to dodge it, as we've seen, and Gaara's sand can move fast enough to block it. Izanami doesn't even matter at all, because he can only use it a maximum of 2 times, and each time he uses it, he
loses an eye, right? Yeah, definitely.
So even if he could get rid of 2 of
he probably wouldn't use that. He wouldn't want to give up an eye. That's a very significant thing to give up for someone like Itachi.
Left to fight with no Sharingan. So all in all, I'm pretty confident that the Kage have this in the bag. Now, I was planning on talking about Edo Itachi at the end here, but this video is already almost 30 minutes long, and I don't know if I want to make a whole separate video about it, but I definitely don't have enough time left in this video to go over it here. Edo Itachi aside, I'm pretty sure I've covered everything I needed to, so hope everybody enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks.
Great video by Swag, man. Great video as always. Alright, I believe that is it. Great video by Swag. Now, I want to apologize because he ended up going over, you know, the stuff that I thought he wasn't going to go over. He did go over it, so my apologies for that. He didn't go over it to the fullest extent. He kind of glanced over like the Materasu and stuff like that. Now, yes, even in a Susanoo, Gaara and Onoki could still pose a threat, especially, you know, with Gaara being able to pull him out of the Susanoo like he did with Madara, and Onoki using his particle style. Like I said, the numbers would overwhelm him. The offensive abilities of the 5 Kage are very problematic. You know, they have 2 individuals that could probably break it, 2 individuals that could pull him out of it, and an individual that can melt it to some extent with Mei, right? That's just kryptonite to him. You know, his tools would be heavily challenged by the 5 Kage. Now, I still think there's a possibility it could win, but like I said, it's very unlikely. And to be quite frank, I'm actually going to lower his chances a little bit. I said 3 to 3.5, up to 4 out of 10. No, I think it's only 1 to 2 out of 10, 2 max out of 10 in the right environment. So I want to refute what I said earlier. I think saying 4 out of 10 is too much. That almost implies that Itachi has a formidable chance, which he does not. He has a very, very, very slim chance to win. 2 out of 10 in the right environment, right? With the right circumstances. So, in an infinite domain. So, he almost has no chance here. The Amaterasu, the Tosuka Blade, the Yatamir, the Susanoo, his Genjutsu, it would be problematic for all of them, right? But all of them together might not even give him a chance. He'd have to not be there, right? He'd have to be subtle with his Genjutsu, use his ability to deceive with his extreme proficiency in Genjutsu. He'd have to do that. That's his best approach, in my opinion. And only pull out the Susanoo when, his back is against the wall. That's when he would have to pull it out, in my opinion. Thinking of a scenario here, he'd probably have to take out, I don't know, because all of them can affect the Susanoo to some extent. Gaara would probably be, probably Mei. Mei would probably be the easiest to take out, right? She's probably the weakest out of the 5, in my opinion. The hardest would probably be maybe A because of his speed. And with speed, that's even quick enough to apparently, according to A himself, negate a Sharingan. You know how Sharingan can perceive movements. His speed is so great that even a Sharingan has a hard time keeping up with, his strikes. So A would probably be the most difficult to take out. Mei would be the easiest, but it'd be very hard because they're working together. And they would definitely come up with a strategy for his abilities. I think the greatest threat to them would probably be the Amaterasu and Genjutsu. I think that'd be the greatest threat to them. And if he's subtle enough, do I think it's impossible for him to Genjutsu a couple of them? I don't think so. But highly, highly, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. And, Swag said, don't look at him in the eye. But can they do what my guy can? How my guy didn't look him in the eye in part 1 Naruto. Can they do that, though? Can they? I don't know if they can. It's easy to say that, but can they do that? I don't know. At the end of the day, guys, I know Itachi's my favorite character. I'm trying to find something that he could do, but like I said, he would lose in most scenarios. In most of them, he'd lose no matter the environment. They'd all work together. And let's say he is trying to be subtle, hiding. They'd have each other's backs. The second they see him, A would blitz him. Orochi would amplify Tsunade's speed and strength with his ability to manipulate gravity, and they'd catch him. A would definitely catch him because I believe he's faster than Itachi. So he'd lose. Basically, he'd lose. But this is a very interesting video. It's something you can think about for a long time. I could talk about this for a long time, but I don't want to keep ranting. This was a great video by Swag. I think he did a very good job here, and he was very fair with his assessment. I know he's an Uchiha fan as well, but he was still very fair, and the conclusion is clear. The Swagkage would win in most scenarios. Now, Itachi could win in a very slim amount of scenarios, right? In the right environment, with the right circumstances, maybe he could win. Maybe he could pull it off, especially if he's in his prime. If he's sick, the odds are very slim to none. Basically, 1 out of 10 is his best shot with extremely, extremely high difficulty. He won't win. Almost impossible if he's sick. If he's in his prime, it's a different story. He still would only win 2 out of 10 times at best with extremely high difficulty. In reanimated form, that'd be a little different because he has infinite chakra. So I don't want to keep ranting though. I'm gonna end it here. But great video by Swag. I can't believe it took me so long to do this. This was one of the best videos I've seen, the most interesting videos I've seen. But if you guys have any other recommendations, let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video. This is Jittery signing out. Peace.